Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're jumping into a story that, seriously, even after 200 years, pretty much wrote the book on romance. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. But here's the thing, it's so much more than just a love story. What we're going to see is that it's actually this incredible, sharp takedown of a world completely hung up on money, social status, and yeah, those tricky first impressions. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the most famous opening line in all of English literature. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? It just perfectly paints this picture of Regency England where everything's about romance and finding a partner. But, come on, Jane Austen is way, way too smart for that.
Right. Is it a truth or is it a trap? Because you have to ask yourself, what if this so-called universal truth has nothing to do with love? Like, at all? What if it's really about something much more desperate, like survival? And boom, with that one single sentence, Austen lays out the entire conflict of the book, the incredibly high-stakes game of marriage.
So, that brings us to our first section, a truth universally acknowledged. We're talking about the marriage market. Yeah, to really get what's going on with these characters, you first have to understand the insane game they were all forced to play.
See, back in 19th century England, especially for women in the sort of middle to upper class like our main characters, marriage wasn't just an option. It was pretty much the only option. There was no career path. You couldn't just go be a doctor or a lawyer or start your own business. Nope. Your entire financial future, where you lived, who you were in society, it all came down to one thing, making a good marriage. So this wasn't about finding your soulmate, not really. This was about cold, hard economic necessity.
And absolutely no one feels this pressure more than the Bennet family. This is their big dilemma. We're talking about a family that is teetering right on the edge, basically living on borrowed time.
The whole problem boils down to this one really frustrating legal thing called entailment. So here's the deal. This rule basically said that property could only be passed down to men. The Bennet family has 5 daughters and no sons. So when Mr. Bennet dies, their home, their income, everything, it doesn't go to them. It goes to the next man in line, some distant cousin they don't even like, which means the girls get left with, well, nothing.
So you see the problem, right? With their dad getting older, these 5 sisters are facing the very real possibility of losing absolutely everything. This isn't just about romance anymore. It's a ticking clock. If they don't find husbands with money and fast, they're looking at being poor and, frankly, social outcasts. All of a sudden, their mom's constant, frantic obsession with getting them married, it doesn't seem so ridiculous anymore, does it? It's just pure, unfiltered panic.
All right, next up, Pride clashes with Prejudice. We're talking about the players and the problem. So into this total pressure cooker of a situation walk our 2 main characters. And well, their clashing personalities are what give the book its name and all of its incredible tension. So let's meet them.
So on one side, you've got Elizabeth Bennet. She's smart, she's funny, she has a super sharp tongue, and she trusts her own judgment, maybe a little too much. And on the other side, Fitzwilliam Darcy. He is ridiculously wealthy, kind of standoffish, definitely proud, and honestly, pretty socially awkward. They could not be more different. I mean, they are on an absolute collision course from the moment they meet.
And here it is. The moment it all goes completely off the rails. At the very first party where they meet, Elizabeth overhears Darcy say this about her. He says she's not handsome enough to tempt me. Ouch. I mean, can you imagine? His pride deals a massive blow to her pride, and in that exact moment, her prejudice against him is set in stone. She basically decides then and there that he is the last man on earth she would ever marry.
And that one insult just kicks off this whole chain reaction of misunderstandings. It's like a snowball effect. So first, you've got the insult at the ball. Then her bad opinion of him gets totally supercharged by this charming guy named Mr. Wickham, who is secretly a total snake and feeds her a bunch of lies about how terrible Darcy is. And all of this leads to, wait for it, one of the most epically disastrous and just plain insulting marriage proposals you will ever read.
Okay, so let's get to the turning point, the letter and the lake. Just when you think these 2 will hate each other forever, I mean, it seems totally set in stone. The whole story pivots. We go from this comedy of errors to something way deeper, a story about really figuring yourself out. And it all starts with a letter and, yeah, a lake.
So remember that awful proposal?
It's a train wreck. Darcy basically tells Elizabeth he loves her against his better judgment and then insults her entire family. It's bad. So of course she furiously turns him down. But instead of just slinking away, he does something unexpected. He writes her this long, detailed letter that explains everything. He exposes Wickham for the liar he is and gives his side of the story. And reading this letter just rocks Elizabeth's world. It forces her to face this horrible idea. What if her precious judgment, the one thing she's always trusted, was dead wrong?
And that letter? It's really just the beginning of the dam breaking. Elizabeth starts to realize she was totally blinded by her own prejudice. Then she takes this trip and ends up, completely by accident, at his huge estate, Pemberley. And there, she hears from his staff how kind he is. She sees a different side of him as a good boss, a loving brother. And then the final piece falls into place. Her family gets into this massive, reputation-destroying crisis, and who secretly steps in to fix it all? Darcy. He uses his own money and power to save their name. And that's when she finally truly sees the man he is behind that proud, awkward mask.
Okay, so let's talk about why we still love this book. Why is it more than just a love story? So yeah, they get past their own baggage and they find each other, and it's an amazing love story. But the reason it's still so huge 200 years later is because Jane Austen was doing something so much bigger, so much more revolutionary than just writing another romance. Think of it this way. Austen uses all the different relationships in the book to lay out her whole theory on marriage. It's brilliant. On one end of the spectrum, you have Lydia and Wickham. Their marriage is based on pure impulse and attraction, and Austen's verdict is pretty clear. It's reckless and a total disaster. Then, on the complete opposite end, you have Charlotte and Mr. Collins. Theirs is all about security and convenience. It's practical, sure, but also kind of sad and completely without love. And then you get Elizabeth and Darcy. They're the ideal. Their relationship isn't about passion or money. It's built on something solid, real respect and deep understanding.
I mean, the legacy of this book is just huge. Let's take off a few reasons why. First, you have Elizabeth Bennet, this fiercely independent heroine who demands respect. She turns down 2 marriage proposals from powerful men. That was totally revolutionary for the time. Second, you know the whole enemies to lovers thing you see in every rom-com? Yeah, this is basically the blueprint. Plus, the book is just wickedly funny. It's such a sharp satire of social climbers and snobs. But most of all, it's a story about how, sometimes, the biggest thing standing in your way is you.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. It's a story about learning to see past those snap judgments and first impressions, not just in other people, but, and this is the hard part, in ourselves. The whole journey of Pride and Prejudice isn't just about a boy and a girl falling in love. It's about 2 people who are forced to look in the mirror and face their own biggest flaws. His pride, her prejudice. And through that, they become better people. It's about that tough, humbling moment where you have to admit, wow, I was wrong.
And that really leaves us with a question that feels just as urgent today as it did 200 years ago. We live in a world that is constantly pushing us to curate a perfect image, to judge people in a split second based on the most superficial stuff. So, how do we actually get past all that noise? How do we find a connection, a love, that's based on who we really truly are? That's the challenge Jane Austen gives us, and it's one we're still trying to figure out.